Hmm. Why does this rocket control unit have an oscilloscope on it? It seems somewhat. You would think the first thing a rocket control unit should have is a terminal prompt. Wait, a prompt, wouldn't that be in a windowed operating system instead of. Never mind. This is becoming too semantic. Now we have available steel furnaces, which require stone and iron and coal, which we have all of on the main bus, instead of separated by practically the void of space, infinite and vast, which is a redundant statement. The difference between vast, or rather, the difference between infinite and vastly infinite. Such a distinction being only valuable in some kind of humor. This looks correct. This is actually probably incorrect. These can all be consolidated. That line would actually probably be a small interference. Which could be corrected on site actually, not a problem. And so that can be consolidated by exactly three tiles. And should we have acid be one of our liquids? Or should that be backlogged as well, since it's not a prime element? The only reason we distinguished these three oils from each other is because they're all produced at specific ratios, and if there is a clog of, well, if you produce one of them, you produce all of them, and so there would be clogs of different unused oils everywhere that you would need to route back into other modules, and that's a problem. And so this is one of the only things I'm pre-processing instead of backlogging. Whereas backlogging is reverse Polish notation. Pre-processing is like some kind of functional notation. Prefix notation. Yes. Should I leave a space here for uranium, actually? Because that's a basic element. Probably. Or should I have it be here instead? That seems wrong. Liquid should all be bundled together and solid should all be bundled. Because otherwise it's just not right. Oh. There, this won't be used for eons, so I won't even think about it currently. Neither will those, actually. Unless I prefabricate water before it's even necessary. And so now we have this upgrade. This upgrade can't really be implemented practically until much later, and would actually require revisions of many branches because of the system we made. And logic technically isn't that useful until later, when we can use it to do things like balancing and other things that require complex thought. This should probably be pre-processed. And this would be an upgrade that would be most useful if taken early. And so that would be one that we do first. And this looks correct. Ammunition relays look correct. Now we begin production of the steel furnace branch, which will be here because it's the next space available. Very basic partitioning. No better is necessary. Should still probably leave an alley for deeper branches in case that becomes a necessity. In fact, I didn't do enough of that here, and so it's grid locked until I destroy some of these branches and move them further in, deeper under the surface. So it's like an array of arrays. I hate the term array, however, it's so needlessly overcomplicated. Technically, an array is just a very long vector. Isn't a vector technically only a list of elements? You can have vector 2 for 2-dimensional space and vector 3 for 3-dimensional space. You can just have n-dimensional vectors for however elements you want to store, and it can be arbitrary. Should probably think about the stoichiometry of this branch before implementing. So the end production speed, which we'll base everything on, and end consumption speed as well. We can produce, it would appear, 3 of these every second, or 1 of these every 3 seconds. And so, need a production of 2 steel per second, and 10 divided by 3, that would be 3.3 recurring, which is, well, in this case that ceilings to 4 per second, which would be slight overproduction. So 4 brick per second, 2 steel per second, that's 1:2 ratio. And these two can be produced at differing frequencies because brick actually produces quickly. Crafting time of 3.2 per second, and brief intermission. And temporary solution as well. This was close enough to us at the time that it's easy to resolve now. They only broke 1 arm and 1 belt, and slightly damaged everything else. It would have been nice if they would have targeted something like this first instead of this 2 feet away, still outside of the range of these. As I was saying, this has a production time of 1 every 16 seconds, and this has a production time of 1 every 3.2 seconds. And this consumes 2 stone rather than 1 ore, and this consumes 5 iron plates rather than 1 ore. So actually this consumes 5 iron ore every 16 seconds, which when turned into a ratio and rounded is close to 1 iron ore every 3 seconds, and this would be close to 1 stone every 1.6 seconds. And we can continue science now. This is a cheap one. Probably make an alley this wide this time. However, that would probably be in the way of any expansion. A flamethrower would help with this. So would nuclear warheads, actually. And that's more wood than I will ever use for anything. And belts are becoming sparse. Resupply. This also looks much better than the spaghetti monster of typical organic development of the facility, where things are made when they're needed and placed wherever. And everything is pre-processed. So you have 12 billion elements, each one of them needing their own unique belt to be fed on. In this situation, we have 5 solid prime elements and 4 prime liquid elements, adding to 9 elements for 9 lines in total of what we need to go everywhere, and everything else can be localized. There's only 9 centralized elements instead of uncountable. And so if we need 2 steel per second, we just multiply this entire equation by 2, leading to a requisite of instead of 1 iron every 3 seconds, that would be 2 iron every 3 seconds, which would be 2 of these, technically. Only 2 iron furnaces. Or am I doing the mathematics incorrect, which is more likely? Oh yes, because we actually need to also multiply that by 3. So that would be, instead of 2, that would be 6 iron for 2 steel. Or, no. It's these complex equations that become the problem when you're trying to do mental math, which is already a feat. And this buffer is conveniently placed for removing these excess ammunition. That's a science we won't be producing until sometime later. And is also easy to produce, yet again because of the backlogging, like usual. This is exactly why I invented this as a solution, so that things like military science packs wouldn't be a nightmare to invent, or produce rather. I just need to produce them somewhere along the right-hand side of the bus, and then ship them back to where they're needed on a separate belt, which is the only complicating variable, and can actually be run very far away from everything else to make it out of the way. Ideally, all of these science producers would be located next to each other somewhere very far along the belt. But things are made when they're needed, which is a problem. Bad partitioning. Which is similar to how hard drives fragment, actually. Sectors are partitioned, and the gaps that are left behind are too small for anything significant to be stored. So it's like filling a space with very large spheres, and you still have a lot of airspace left, but you can't fit any more spheres in, even though technically there's plenty of volume for it. It's because the spheres need to deform in order to fill the volume.